Hi, and welcome to Guru Grit, the channel where we like to explore topics as deeply and vastly as possible, and the lesser known they are, the better. The more curious we get to be and play with those things. So it's a beautiful sunny day here in Canada, on this wonderful Tuesday afternoon, and it's a perfect day to film this topic. I posted the Saturn-Moon conjunction video last week, and my beautiful client and viewer, Sandiana, wrote in and asked, well, what about serial killers? So of course, being Tuesday, ruled by Mars, violence and war and all that good stuff, I thought, why not answer that today? It'd be perfect. And she wrote in and said she notices a connection between the 12th house and the first house and some of these very notorious high profile individuals. So I'm going to go through that. So firstly, I'd like to start by saying the 12th house, firstly, for any birth chart, anything, you have to really scratch beneath the surface. Astrology to me is a science, but it is an occult science, and the occult is nuanced. It's a very delicate art form that requires patience, persistence, self-reflection, honesty, and expertise to really grasp something. You have to be very honest with yourself. You have to take a lot of time to figure it out. So what I really like about that is if you open any chart, all you're ever going to see first and foremost is potential for something. But which way that goes is up to the individual. Okay, they can be shaped by life and they can choose to be shaped by life. They can shape themselves, they can shape their life, etc. So we look at the 12th house. Let's just get over. There's lots of ways to see something like that, but it's very rare, isn't it? So I see the thing about studying high profile cases is you're always looking at something after the fact. I don't think you can look at something like astrology and say, oh, well, this person would make a great nurse. They should go to nursing school. It's like, yeah, that's the logical advice you give to most people. You can't say lock them up ahead of time just in case they go the other way. That's like a very small number. Now, I don't wish that on anyone. I don't wish that karma on anybody. This is why I don't like to play around with birth charts, but let's say 12th house, let's start there. On the one hand, that's quite accurate because the 12th house has a lot to do with things that we don't see. In my opinion, it's like the ether. It doesn't have any sort of tangible effect. This is why fame, refined art, things that we can feel inspiration and imagination from, like fame is an illusion. It's an illusory house. It kind of dissolves it does dissolve the material. It's the house of loss. So in this sense, it has a lot to do with things we don't see. It's very secretive. Politicians are notorious for 8, 10, 12 and 1. But the 12th house, a wonderful viewer of mine pointed out in a live, Joe Biden has a stellium in the 12th house. I had to look at it. A real one. No outer planets, okay? No funny little planet here, little planet there. A full-on, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars. A full-on inner planet stellium in the 12th house. This means people who have a lot of 12th house energy understand what goes on more so than we do. So they know something we don't. So say you have a 12th house stellium and you're like, I don't want to be a politician. I don't even want to be an actor. I don't want to be an artist. It's like, maybe so, but you could do something where you trade on secrets. It doesn't matter. You could be a physician. You have to keep the privacy of your patients intact, the integrity, all of that. Lawyers have to do this. They have to have tact. They have to know when not to tell someone something. Trade secrets, like the beauty industry or the cooking industry or anything really nuanced, even like decor, interior design, decorating, even architecture, everything is nuanced. Engineering, one bolt here, one screw there, it can collapse the whole thing. So it's people who understand these things, like nuance and secrets and things that are not commonly known, I suppose. But yes, politicians, and I feel they know a lot of what we don't. That's pretty much why they're in power. It's kind of like a dirty exchange of corrupt things or, dirt that you have on others. The only reason you're in power is because you know something about that other person that they don't want us to know, etc. First house is very obvious. First house is the house of self-image. So anybody with planets in the first house, whether they be, positive or negative, doesn't really matter. You can have Saturn in the first house and be very successful because it's going to give you a sense of seriousness. Your personality has gravitas, it has ambition, it wants to be someone. It can take some time to figure out who you are if the first house is damaged, but the need is very strong with these people. So, you could generally, politicians do well with planets in the 1st, 7th, 10th, they have, or even the 5th, You can have a mass control over other people. High positions, hold high positions, positions of authority, self-employment, several ascendants, okay, if there's a connection, let's say, between the 10th and the first ruler, all these things. Doesn't necessarily mean that you do something negative, but you will be known for something, or you can very easily be known for something, especially the 1st and 7th axis, yourself and other people. If it's very highlighted, then those people generally tend to come into reputation. Now, which way that goes is out of our hands. It's up to them, isn't it? What they choose to do to gain that notoriety or infamy, but it's very, very doable. Now, the other thing, the obvious place people want to look when they consider deep, dark matters like this would be the 8th house. That's possible, sure. I don't think just because you have a planet in the 8th house, you're like inherently bad or evil, or no, I don't think that's true. Remember, the 8th house rules power. If you have a powerless planet there, you're going to seek power, and sometimes you might bully others to feel powerful. You might have a problem controlling your temper, but when you lose your temper, you feel like you take some of your power back. So it takes some time to mature. It takes some time to figure yourself out, but hopefully you'll eventually get there, and then it's also the house of authenticity. So very often I see people whose, their chart ruler goes into the 8th house. That person's usually kind of like no nonsense. And not necessarily in a tactless way, but they just want to know, if you're gossiping about someone who just left a dinner party, they'd be like, why are you doing this? You just had them in your home. Why are you like this? Like, speak the truth. Just be real. They can be very, very true. But it obviously does have deeper, more mystical connotations as well, like 8th house, traditionally rules things like inheritances, other people's resources, taxes, and death. Let's see. I don't think it's death. I think it's like what happens after death, like the actual transition. So this is a very common house. If you want to have some fun, look at the charts of people belonging to royal families. Why? Because you come into your power after someone dies. You live off their inherited title. You take their land, whatever, and you live off of other people's money. You live off of tax dollars and tax money. So, very, very mysterious too. Queen Elizabeth II and Prince William both have moon in the 8th house. I'm sure most members of those families will have something to do with that. And then the 12th house is quite private, or maybe like a damaged 4th house, like, because it's the house of nourishment or one's mother, and usually the relationships aren't very warm. It's kind of an exception, historically, I mean. So, everything is very, very strategic and planned out. Now let's think, speaking of the 4th house, why do I think you can't just sum up and say things like, actually, another one of my wonderful viewers and new TikTok friends, Katie's also mentioned, I see a correlation with Capricorns and crime. And some people say Cancer, some people say Capricorn. Well, here's the thing. First of all, the ruler of Capricorn is Saturn, which traditionally rules death. Okay, so I don't use outer planets, but if you were to, you would see, Saturn has a lot to do with that, of like malnourishment, of some kind of pleasantness of life, I suppose. And then the other thing to note is Moon. Moon is the mind and how you feel. Well, what does that indicate? Your capacity to be mentally stable, emotionally stable. Is that person volatile? Is that person predictable? Can they snap? And Cancer is very volatile as a sign. It's very highly unstable. All water signs are unpredictable to some degree, but Cancer is like peak. It's the first one. It's the baby. It hasn't mellowed out yet, like Pisces. So it can go either way. Of course, it takes deep looking into, but let's just start there. So let's have a look then. If you put the ruler of Capricorn in the natal house, let's say of Cancer, which is the 4th house, this is my starting point. This is how I do it. If I want to see if someone has the capacity to be happy, I look at the 4th house, because the 4th house is how you nourish yourself, soothe yourself. It associates with our mother. So even if you have a happy moon in Taurus somewhere on the other side of your chart, if your 4th house is getting battered by really harsh planets, you are gonna have to learn to be happy. And the starting point is to accept that happiness is a skill. you know? And sometimes when people have a really rough fourth house, then they think, but why is that person always happy and they got fired and my boss yelled at me and I cried in the bathroom? They're so lucky. It's like, no, you just have to learn. You have to learn to cope, and sometimes they can't. So I'm exposing myself a bit because I have, it was only after the fact that I was thinking about what I was gonna say, I realized, oh my goodness, I have Saturn in the fourth house and I would never do such a thing. But should anything such thing happen, I've been set up, it's not me, okay? Saturn in the fourth house can really malnourish a person's sense of this like inner equilibrium or value or joy in the small things. It can rob them of affection. When they're young, they might have had really, you know, in the very, very horrible sense, a neglectful parents, or sometimes just parents that are very harsh, you know, like they want you to succeed, they don't care if you want to play, they don't really hug you, they don't really show you love. So this is what I mean. I don't think anybody's born that way. I don't think anybody's born and out of the womb they're like, I'm gonna do this one day. Just like you're not born rich, you're not born smart, you're not born funny. You have talents that you work on, that you develop over time, right? You can be born into a rich family, but it's not your wealth. And even if it is, you wouldn't know what to do with it. You know, you have to be of legal age. So everything is like developed or earned over time. Now, if you're born with, you know, a fourth house that's not doing so great, you might be shaped to be a colder person. The fourth house has to do with listening, deep understanding of others, okay? Can you counsel them? Are you the wise friend in your friend group, like a wise owl? Are you the voice of reason? Do you give people good advice, good counsel? If you can, be a good listener, be a good talker, it can be seen there. It's the house that has to do with like deep meditative thought and reflection, you know, like somehow transcends the superficial abilities of the mind. Can you counsel people? Can you be a good therapist? Are you a counselor? Are you a guidance counselor? Any of those things. So if that is taken from you and you don't work with it, you don't work with the potential that you could be good at it because you just think, well, either you have it or you don't. Well, it's good enough. It's like you have to work, you have to sharpen that skill set, right? So say you have Saturn in the fourth house, it's a bit, you know, it has a potential to make the person less empathetic or sympathetic towards others. So it's important for them to realize it's like, hey, what's the big deal if someone broke up with you? You only knew them for like 6 months. But to that person, it's like the end of the world because they were so in love. But to you, you're really rational and you're like, but it's only 6 months. It's not like you're a widow or a widower. It's just like 6 months. But you have to understand, to that person, it's all relative. It's very, very painful. So you have to kind of take note and work on that. So a very obvious example, I had to check because I had a very strong, you know, inkling, and I think this is very common knowledge, that Jeffrey Dahmer has Saturn in the fourth house. And he had a very neglectful mother and father. And he resented his sibling when they were born because he didn't get any of his parents' attention. So that's a very obvious starting place. So you want to check the fourth house. Now, the indicator of the fourth house, is like I mentioned, is the moon. So the moon, you want to have a stable, happy moon. And there's many, many ways this can go. So I don't never really take anything at face value with astrology. You really have to calculate. You have to look and go 4 levels deep just to get like half an answer if you want to be very accurate. And this is a very touchy topic, and I don't want to make this for like entertainment because it's so serious and so nasty. But just consider the moon. Is the moon happy? What house? What sign? What aspect? And what is it sitting with? So this brings us to, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer had a moon in the 7th house in Aries with Mars. Now, in most other people's charts, I don't think that's such a big deal, do you know? But maybe because the 7th house is other people, it's someone who has a propensity for violence or aggression towards them. And this isn't true of all charts. There really has to be a lot going on. But an unstable moon and Mercury are the 2 planets you would judge the capacity for somebody's mental health as well. So if they've got a lot going on, you know, that person has to work really, really hard to come into equilibrium with themselves. It's not impossible, you know? But if you think like historically, where we didn't really speak about stigma and mental health, you can kind of see how these things slip through the cracks. Like today, it's much more common to say, I'm just having an off day, and everyone just kind of like leaves you to your own devices, and that's fine, and you get to take time for yourself and recuperate. But let's use some examples. So, moon with the nodes. Moon with the nodes, the lunar nodes, the north node or the south node, can make a person hypersensitive, but in an erratic way that they don't really know how to deal. So, if you have a moon with the north node, you could be, in my opinion, I think you could be a genius, just incredible. Or south node, actually. But if you don't understand how to control your emotions and have composure, or that it's natural that you feel this big appetite and this sort of grandeur-ness for life, you can get carried away. You can get carried away thinking, oh, I'm untouchable, there's no consequences, I can be as delusional as I want, or any such thing. And it can really, affect people in this sense. I believe one of the Columbine shooters had moon with the south node. And actually the second one had south node in the 4th house. So the 4th house is being affected by the south node. But I also want to mention, I have to preface everything because I'm so paranoid, people are going to go... Generally, the lunar nodes on the axis of 4th and the 10th, can produce great material success for most people who, want to be successful and want to be stable and all those things. Nothing to worry about. But you could see how when the moon is affected, you can get some, really, really intense results. Ted Bundy, interestingly enough, his chart really does show a very charming, high charisma individual. But the moon sat with, oh my goodness, the malefics are Sun, Mars, the nodes, and Saturn. And the moon sat with the malefics. So it's south node. It was Sun, Mars, south node, moon, I think. So you could see that person could have a very calculating mind. They would be an amazing engineer, architect, editor, anything really technical, anything with equipment, like technical skill, manual skill, machinery. Just really could be very, very brilliant. But at the same time, the moon is afflicted. So maybe that person just didn't really understand. Well, clearly, but in general, maybe that person has to work hard on their confidence. They have to work hard on how they see life, how they perceive pain. They have to dive deep and work on that. Probably something very strategic would make them feel better, like seeking security and seeking safety in themselves and channeling aggression properly, right? Another one is it Nanny Doss, I think. It's a woman who also had an afflicted moon, who murdered 11 of her family members, a famous female serial killer who did away with 4 husbands. And before you shout iconic, just awful. Her own mother, 2 of her children, 2 of her sisters, and her mother-in-law, and 1 of her grandchildren through the medium of rat poison. Also, moon with a node. And I think Saturn as well. Moon, Saturn, one of the nodes. South node, I believe. So, people who have these exacerbated emotions and then they don't understand how to channel them properly. And they can be very, very, they could be easily disturbed. Very sensitive. Honestly, to me, it's like an exposed raw nerve ending. If you've ever had a nerve ending, after you're pulling a tooth and you put your tongue in there, it's just like the most awful pain. But imagine that as an emotional body. So it's a great topic to stem off from the Saturn-Moon combination, because sometimes those people too can be or debilitated moon can be like a very exposed nerve ending that's just very sensitive to everything and is quick to charge, or quick to, not physically, but they could take offense and then they plot and they plan. So it's good for certain things. If you want to be a chess player, it's amazing. Mathematician, it's amazing, But if you want to be vengeful, probably not so great. But there's so many ways to judge. There's so many ways to see. You even something like experience with someone's family. Do they have a very sad second house? Is the south node there? Is a debilitated Saturn there in combination with some of the other things I said? You'll see someone who takes life personally. So if you go through history, I'm sure you'll be able to find so many examples, but it's best we stay off some topics. But for the purpose of education and for answering this really, really creative question, actually, and it just flowed so well off of the previous one, then certainly, yes, you can see how when someone is void of value, of self-value, you know, like with Venus, Moon, Mercury, Moon imbalances, and then these planetary placements that show what house they hurt, how that person experienced that in their lifetime, then surely you'll be able to see like, oh, they're gonna have to work hard not to struggle with that. And you can cultivate and foster, you know, like confidence in that person, foster nurturing or whatever they need. Teach them, the best thing you can do for any child is teach them how to self-soothe, because you can't always be there. So in any case, thank you so much for listening. Let me know if you have any more requests. I can record your answers. As you know, I post on TikTok regularly, but what can I really say in 1 minute? I feel like saying something in 1 minute just opens the floodgate for even more confusion. So thank you so much for being here and listening and viewing, and I wish you a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.